Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just another tinfoil hat. Welcome to my show. Today we are going to be discussing something that's come to my attention more times than I can count, with more occurrences than I can here recount. Faceless entities. So, faceless entities, why are they interesting? Well, aside from being, in my humble opinion, really creepy, I think that they may also be a dead giveaway to a very important aspect of paranormal phenomenon, that old bandwagon of liminality. And what is one of the most liminal points of all, except where subjectivity ends and objectivity begins? So before we really jump in, though, I think that, like all things strange and unusual, there are no hard and fast categorizations that really should apply. In putting together this episode, I was faced, with what at first seems to be an obvious question. What determines facelessness as opposed to face-ishness? I mean, do we consider, say, the entities of the Cusack encounter to have had faces simply because one of them appeared to have a nose which was observed only by one of the witnesses? Or what about the Banshee of the Celtic fairy faith, which is often described as veiled? And we may be led to assume then that there is indeed a face behind the veil. For me, the paranormal, this field of crop circles, is just simply not so easy to fence in. Different types of phenomena kind of bleed one into the other. So here I have determined what to include by whether the absence of a face or facial features takes precedence in the description of the entity observed. Now, while Slender Man may be a folktale of the internet age, older folklore is also rife with entities described as lacking a face or having a face obscured. The Banshee of the Celtic fairy faith is a prime example of this, often described as veiled, or in the case of one account from County Kildare in July of 1912, being completely covered, its face obscured by a cape. A popularized yokai of Japan is the Nepara bow, which uses its lack of a face mainly for shock value. And a very similar effect is seen from a folktale from Algoma, Wisconsin, that of the lanky night walker. A half step away from facelessness, it was described as expressionless, and its face was lacking in description. Apparently the folktale, the kid who saw it was absolutely stunned and couldn't really gather his senses about what he had even seen. Now, there are also classical ghost stories which include these faceless entities. A very notable one is the Faceless Man of Bolton Park in Lincolnshire, whose outfit is perfectly described in spite of the fact that apparently he forgot to wear his face. Now, too, kind of back to that half step away in fairy lore with the Banshee, we have these spectral figures appearing very similar to the Banshee as well. One of these is the ghost of Beacon Tree Station in London, which is described as this faceless woman in white with blonde hair. Now, the iconography here is really what ties it kind of to the Banshee. The positioning of the ghost at a station, congruent to the Banshee's roadside, the fact that it wears white and lacks a face, all kind of appear similar, again, in the symbols or iconography of it, to the Banshee. Now, on the flip side, too, we also have, in the vein of Banshees, a faceless entity serving as an omen. The Gray Man of Pelican Inn in Pawleys Island, South Carolina, traditionally is said to appear before great storms. It's said that he manifests wearing a gray fishing cap, but again, lacking a face. Now, too, there's a lot of spectral nuns and monks which apparently don't have faces, notably the Faceless Nun of Foley Hall in Indiana, or the Faceless Monk of the Mission San Juan Capistrano in California. UFO occupants also sometimes appear faceless or with their faces obscured. Of course, in the 1967 Cusack encounter, these four small imp-like beings were observed to be completely covered in a seamless, silky black suit, if indeed it was a suit. Only one of the witnesses to this event noticed a nose on one of the entities. Other than that, the rest were completely faceless, and even the one with the nose still lacked an eyes or mouth. The entities of the Pascagoula abduction also notoriously lacked genuine faces. They were described as these strange grayish type entities, almost robotic in nature, which had pointed noses, but only slits for eyes and a mouth. Now, it's interesting, too, because around the time of the Pascagoula abduction, there are actually many sightings across the country of entities which fit that description. But perhaps more interesting here is the fact that one of the witnesses to the Pascagoula abduction, Calvin Parker, now claims through more extensive hypnosis that he has had multiple abduction-type scenarios throughout his life, with some including a figure which he describes as a faceless yet beautiful woman. However, given the nature of hypnosis, he also describes this beautiful faceless woman as smiling pleasantly, so you can take that as you will. Other UFO entities, notably the boiler suit entities of mid-century fame, seem to be covering their faces with what could be considered some sort of spacesuit. Additionally, other accounts, like the 1981 Zimbabwe sighting of an orange ball of light and these 3 to 4 tall entities in silver coveralls described the faces as too bright to be seen. Now it's really interesting here too because that particular case was framed in the belief system of the witness as these entities being the spirits of the ancestors. And also too, this description of faces which are too bright to be seen comes up a lot in religious encounters. Creepy creatures of cryptid fame can also fall woefully short in the face department. In the Missouri Monster case of 1972, witnesses said that the creature's face was obscured behind its excessively long hair. And this is something noticed in other hairy hominid cases as well. It's also noticed in cases of a decidedly stranger nature, such as the Morristown monster, which was spotted in New Jersey in 1966. This thing was described as being the 7-foot-tall, bipedal, scaly creature which also had long, dark, straggly hair. However, it was lacking a face. Probably one of the most dramatic accounts of a cryptid without a face comes from Skinwalker Ranch, in which several people watched a light grow in size until it became some sort of tunnel through which crawled this large, humanoid, dark being which had no face. So what does this mean? Traditionally speaking, not much. We say that Momo's face was covered by its long hair, that a Banshee wears some sort of veil in its spirit form, and that UFO occupants, sometimes decide to wear spacesuits. However, I think it may point to a different explanation entirely. And again, this is pure speculation here, but this idea kind of came to me when my mom was describing this dream she had. In this dream, she was reading a book, and then, as often happens, she realized she was dreaming, and then realized too that then the book, whatever she was reading in the book, was sourced in her own mind. Appropriately, the pages went totally blank. So, what if then, when we're dealing with these blank-faced organisms, what if it's simply a dead giveaway that they are these temporal manifestations which are, as of then, unformed or even part-formed? Now too, in bringing up dream symbolism and the dreamlike qualities of many different types of paranormal phenomena, I'm by no means suggesting that it can be explained away as simply subjective hallucinations or waking dreams. I'm also not trying to say that there is one right answer to all different types of paranormal manifestations. I hold a conviction that there's definitely more than one correct answer to the question of what is all of this stuff. So that being said, I do believe that many of these apparently different manifestations are all simply that, different apparent manifestations, possibly from the same source, and that many of them act only as temporary forms, subject somehow to the observation of the witness or even the subconscious of the culture in which they're observed. So, with these face-obscured entities, or partially faced entities, or faceless entities, could it simply be that these temporary forms are simply not decided yet, that they are literally, as of then, unformed? Now, the concept of part-formed beings is something that I've played around with in the past, especially regarding the Dover demon, which, in opposition to the accounts that I mentioned in this episode, lacked all facial details except for the eyes, which were very prominent. And it's interesting to note that this is observed in many paranormal manifestations. The Dover demon is a great example. The Mothman of Point Pleasant is another fantastic example. You have these things which completely lack a face, except for the eyes, which are very, very prominent. Now, researchers like John Keel have theorized that possibly the eyes are the only inherently real part of the creature or entity observed, and that the rest is just an illusion. Patrick Harpur even theorized a very similar thing regarding light phenomena. And Keel also discussed that in Operation Trojan Horse, that possibly sightings of light phenomena, which often are viewed as not as important as like the hard sightings of a creature or a craft or a specter, possibly the light phenomena may be the most important part of the paranormal. It's also really weird to note then how many entities are described as having self-luminous or glowing eyes. So if we look at this symbolically then too, what if these are the true examples of a conscious entity, the true others amongst us, capable of observing us as we observe it, whereas these examples of things that lack eyes are examples of unformed or unintelligent temporary forms sourced only in our subconscious, which has not yet decided what face to give them? Or are these all completed manifestations of some same core concept, and the lack of a face simply that, another mask for this phenomenon? Well, if you enjoyed this episode on faceless entities, please like, and if you're new to this field of crop circles, go ahead and subscribe to see what weirdness the future may hold. Till then, you can catch me on my website, justanothertinfoilhat.com, to keep up with whatever else I might possibly have going on, and for exclusive content, check out my Patreon page, which is also listed under Just Another Tinfoil Hat. For today, I am Zelia Edgar, signing off.
Doing.